What's your favorite horror movie?
Well, that's a good question. I do love the old Universal classics. The 1930s Frankenstein and Dracula. Those I think are great. But I guess more from just like an amusing perspective. But it's also interesting about how the world has changed. Like, when Frankenstein came out in whatever it was, 1933, 1935 with Boris Karloff, that was a scandal to people. Like, people were there were these disclaimers to say what you're going to see is really going to bother you, and smelling salts for the ladies, and
the fact that it doesn't bother us is probably bothersome.
Yeah, exactly. And there was this famous censure that was applied to that film, where in the famous of famous scenes where the monster. You've never seen this?
Never.
Well, you got to see it. But you know this scene when the monster is brought to life and the hand moves and Dr. Frankenstein screams out, "It's alive!" There was a famous censure applied by the studio there, where, because the line that was delivered by the actor Colin Clive was, "It's alive, it's alive. Now I know what it feels like to be God." And the studio was like, "You can't say that in a movie."
Yeah.
And so they put a big clap of thunder on the soundtrack there, so that his mouth is moving, but you don't hear it. But it's just...
I can't wait to watch this now.
Yeah,
I'll probably be bored through the whole thing, I imagine. I didn't actually like the book. He felt like a whiny little girl, Frankenstein.
The doctor or the monster?
Sorry, not Frankenstein. The monster. It felt so melancholic.
Yeah, it's far more of a work of kind of philosophy in a way than a tale of horror. I mean, there are elements of horror there, or elements of that Gothic movement, to sort of question how much control do we really have over this universe of ours, over this reality of ours? Is science really the be all end all, or is there a way that science can lead us astray to make monsters instead of men?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not. I think that book suffers just from its reputation in a way, that people go to that book expecting a certain kind of story, and they weren't looking for this series of essays in a way.
What's that? There's another one. It is. I have to admit, I'm always surprised when a woman writes good horror. I just don't expect it. There was a movie, something The Nail. The Turn of the Nail, or
Turn of the Screw?
Turn of the Screw.
Yeah, that is a novelette by Thomas Hardy.
Oh, okay, then that's the wrong one.
Yeah.
Neil, what was it? It was on Netflix recently. It was about this family who go into this old house, and the house is haunted, which is, I know. House on Haunted Hill? Is that it? Yeah, I think a woman wrote that one.
I haven't seen that. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein.
Yeah. But I tell you, I think Dracula, the first part before the epistolary back and forth, which always bored me. I could never get past it. But that initial, oh my gosh, I would read that to my wife at night, and I would lay in bed.
Right, the whole thing of is it Jonathan Harker?
Yes.
In the castle with the Count, and that amazing scene where he looks down the sheer wall of the tower and he sees the Count like his head out,
like a big spider,
or like a lizard.
Was it a lizard?
Yeah,
okay,
crawling on the wall, head downward.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Or when he sees him in the coffin, and he says, "Oh, bloated like an insect that had drunken too much blood." He puts it much better.
Yes.
Holy moly, that was excellent.
Yeah, and that I think is sort of the ultimate Gothic work, as far as what it's trying to say. And Stoker brings in a lot of spiritual aspects to it. Now, he wasn't a Catholic, but it is kind of a Catholic work, even though there are things in it that Catholics would say, well, that's not really how that works. Like, for instance, Van Helsing carries around the Eucharist around his neck, to protect him from the Nosferatu. It's very clear this is not simply an undead zombie monster. It's the devil. The devil is animating this creature, and we have to combat it with the powers of Christ. and we are crusaders. There's
in the very beginning, the man's given a crucifix by that old
of
woman.
course, yeah, that's like one of the famous things that wards the vampire away. But these moments where Bram Stoker is trying to, he did a lot of research for this novel. He worked on it for 10 years, traveled to all the places and picked up all this lore. But, these moments where Van Helsing says, well, to protect us from the vampire, we're going to take the Eucharist and we're going to grind it up into this paste, and then we're going to apply it in the cracks of all the door, and we'll be safe now. It's like,
please don't.
Yeah,
that's more horrifying than anything else I've read.
That's right. But the idea behind it, even though it's not motivated by, he treats Catholicism really like just another aspect of folklore.
Right.
Yeah,
but there's
some exactly. Yeah. But there are some things in it when reading it from a Catholic perspective are interesting and edifying, I think. Yeah. Even though it's for me it's like, well, why is that a serious work? Is that a serious thing that serious Catholics should read? And I would say yes. Even though it's silly. It's wrong in some ways, or it's goofy in other ways, and the prime intention of the work is just to thrill you, not to give you a spiritual experience or awakening, but that's
okay. Well, here's a pushback question. Why should I concern myself with thrills when there's so much great literature from the saints to be read? Why would I waste time on a little story when I could be reading scripture? Of course, has stories within it, but the lives of the saints.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think that reading literature and reading light literature, that's what Dracula is. It's light reading. I don't think that should be at the expense of reading the stories of the saints or the legends of the saints. These great collections and the Golden Legend, which are just as wonderful and I think as important as the whole catalog of fairy stories or horror stories. All the strange stories about Saint Nicholas and Saint Christopher, and they're wonderful, and they're born out of the same place as fairy tales are born from. The imagination that wants to kind of enshrine things, or the same place that mythology comes from, to take things that are essential, that are pointing to a certain ideal, and giving it the right sort of flavor to stick in your mind, to spark your imagination, inspire wonder.
If you like that clip, be sure to like and subscribe. Cheers.